now, the government has announced official plans to end the use of hotels to house asylum seekers.
Hurrah! Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick says the first contracts would end in the coming days, with closures taking place into spring 2024.
Well, the government is currently spending £8 million per day to house 50,000 migrants across 400 hotels. Well, joining us now is the Spectator's James Heale. James, what do you make of this announcement? Good news, bad news, no news?
It's a rare bit of good news, I'd say, for the government, and obviously well-timed for Rishi Sunak's one-year anniversary today since becoming Prime Minister. I mean, I was watching the debate in Parliament yesterday at which this was announced, and as one MP stood up and said any day when the Immigration Minister could come to the House and announce some good news is something to be celebrated because it so rarely happens, and I think that's very much the spirit in which this announcement's been received.
James, earlier on we heard, and this is a fact, I'm quoting Henry Bolton, I think we've checked this out as well, boat crossings are down by 20%. Is that the weather? Is it, he talked about an Albanian deal. Finally, there's a deal with Albania. I made the point, James, earlier, that I don't understand a government that can make a deal with Albania because there was such an issue and hasn't made more deals with more people. Because we will always come back to whatever side of the fence you sit on, right? And I'm really strong for me, Nick's strong for her. There's 170,000 people in this country, whether they're on the Bibi Stockholm barge, waiting to go to Rwanda, crammed into a hotel where we're all starving. There's 170,000 people who haven't been processed because our systems are a complete joke. That, for me, is the travesty, James, that nobody seems to go. We need to create a processing system to deal with these people ASAP. That's it.
And there's a couple of things there. I mean, first of all, you're right to say, you know, I think small boat crossings are between 20 to 30% down on last year. That's in part to a lot of things. I mean, some will say partly the weather's that's helped with that. But also the Albania deal, which I think increased deportations by about 90%. So I think Rishi Sunak does want more of those kind of deals. I think it all depends on the relationship with each different individual country. But the key point you make there is about the backlog as well. That is something that's a historic issue that's been built up over the past 10 years. COVID didn't help with that. And so I think it's going to be an issue that they really try and put more resources in. And I think we're starting to see bear the fruits of that. But of course, there's a lot more to do. Prime Minister had a pledge to stop the boats. I don't think he's going to be able to stop them completely by the time of the next election, of course. But I think most Tory MPs will welcome, if not even begrudgingly, just say, you know, at least he's made some dent in that and making some progress so far.
And James, why have they been able to kind of reduce the amount of hotels that they use? Is it simply that they're using alternative accommodation? Are they processing more people? Because behind each of these statistics is a human being, and we want to know where that human being is actually going to go.
Yes, of course, it's both of those things. So they've tried to encourage different use of sites, etc., and they have a policy of moving people out of hotels. So that's always a priority. But it's also, as I say, because of those small boats crossings has now dropped by more than 20% year on year. That's along with additional resources being put into tackling that backlog. Therefore, you free up capacity elsewhere. 50 hotels are going to be closed, moved out of, but there's another sort of 350 which are still waiting. And that's why you saw yesterday in Parliament, one MP said that gratitude is merely a lively expectation of favours to come. They're grateful today, but that's because they expect much more to be done on this area.
But the problem is, and by the way, if I could just make the point, I'm sending our intrepid reporter, Nick Ellaby. He's going to get a Standish in Wigan, one of these hotels that's going to close, and speak to local residents and people maybe who are staying in the hotel. My problem, James, without wanting to sound like a dog with a bone here, is there does never seem to be any forward planning. And you look at it, right, and you go, is this just a headline? They're going to close in spring 2024. The headline for the British people is, in the middle of a cost of living crisis, we're spending £8 million a day on housing people who don't know whether they should be here or not, whilst 170,000 wait for us to come up with a system. I'm proud to be British, but I'm getting increasingly embarrassed by the inability to do the simple things, my friend. You know what I don't understand why it's so complicated.
It's a very big issue because, as Nicola says, you know, there are people involved in all this. I think actually Robert Jenrick, the immigration minister, had a good line on this yesterday. He was talking to one of the Lib Dems in Parliament. He said, the honourable gentleman is an humanitarian NIMBY, not in my backyard. So in the sense that people, we want Britain to be a welcoming, encouraging country, etc. But on the other hand, people have got to live somewhere and you've got to pay for them. There's an £8 million a day hotel bill. That takes a long, long time to get down because we have a backlog historically, but also we've got, a system whereby it's quite difficult, I think, and if you talk to ministers, to try and get people out of the country. Foreign deportation orders are down over the past 10, 12 years. So I think these are really difficult issues, which is why any government is struggling to find them. And that's why Labour, I have to say, doesn't seem to be putting forward the kind of, obvious solutions that some might suspect are out there. There just aren't, which is why it's been an issue for successive governments, and Tony Blair struggled with something not too dissimilar 20 years ago.
And what about the hotel owners? I'm really curious about this because there's one near to my home, well, one in my hometown that I go to that wasn't very well populated with tourists anyway, arguably because it's been used as a hotel for asylum seekers with what I presume might be quite a lucrative deal with the government. The hotel owners there might actually find themselves out of pocket and not making as much money as they previously were, which would mean that the hotel would potentially actually end up closing down for good.
Or market your business differently. Go and find other customers.
Yes, but I'm just saying that they, that's another part of this story as well.
They're making money.
It's not all 4-star hotels that people were, flocking to for a holiday. Some of them are run-down hotels that were
It's been a lifesaver for them.
It has been a lifesaver for them.
I think that, talking to MPs rather than the business element of this, they say that, hotels are meant to be hubs for the local community. So if you step back a sec, they're meant to be tourist, magnets. They're meant to get tourists in there. And I think their concern is that you then have, asylum seekers who aren't earning money, who are basically sitting there, not adding to the economic activity as much as the local areas they would like them to. So that's why we saw MPs from areas with quite coastal constituencies with traditional tourist destinations standing up and saying, we want them, just talking to our constituents, both in the hotel business and outside it, we want to see these hotels return to their traditional purpose in order to bring families, bring new businesses into the area. And I think that's exactly what they're trying to hopefully do, rather than just be dependent on government contracts, which are costing taxpayers, of course, which we all pay every single day.
And the big question, James, is will we get any of the 8 million back? We'll wait and see. Listen, always a pleasure. You are always welcome on Talk. They're smart as carrots this morning at 7:20. Good man. Thank you very much indeed.